So I thought to be funny and to celebrate 500 subscribers on YouTube, I would do a small time challenge for a small time YouTuber, as today we see if you can beat Skyrim as an ant, or as small as possible. I was initially thinking as a baby, but I decided to take the small challenge to the extreme, so hence the ant. What I did not realize in my decade plus of playing Skyrim that this would become the worst challenge I have ever done, and by a long shot. I'd rather be over encumbered than do this challenge. Suffice to say, misery is in store. As for rules for the challenge, for the entire run I have to be at 0.1 size scale, which is the smallest you can be in Skyrim. This will have some extreme setbacks. Mostly my character will be super small, my melee attacks will be extremely nerfed in both range and effectiveness since melee is tied with size, and worst of all, my movement speed will be at 10% or I'll be much slower than over encumbered. Not allowing myself to skip portions of the game except out of necessity, but we will get to that when we do. The aim of this run is all story missions since you can just skip half the game by doing the Thalmor Embassy. With that out of the way, let's begin the misery. Starting with the character creator, I decided to go with High Elf this time. Normally I go with Breton and this time I really should have gone with Breton, but meh. If melee is out of the picture, then it's going to have to be an entirely magic based playthrough. I describe what the run will be, then set my character to small.
Holy, I'm super small, like they could step on me. Why the hell would they arrest Ant-Man?
My turn on the chopping block, and it is a little awkward. They could just step on me and call it a day, but oh well. I'm not even lined up for the block. At least a giant lizard saves my skin. I start out and I am sprinting very fast. Side effects of changing side is that the game hasn't updated my sprint speed yet. After running through the streets, I press sprint, and the game updates my movement speed and immediately regret the challenge. Getting close to the prison, Alduin yells at me, and the game decides to go on holiday. I can't believe I'm the first person to die in the streets of Helgen. Second go with much less nightmare feel, I keep up the movement speed into the keep, and once Roloff cuts my binds with a knife twice the size of me, I'm stuck with my slow run for the rest of the playthrough. At least I can use spells like a fire-breathing ant. After that incursion, it was a very slow walk out of Helgen. Couldn't get any leveling because Roloff kept killing everyone before I could even get close to the room. Otherwise, not much happened heading out of Helgen. Took just about 30 minutes. Outside of the cave, I would return to my natural environment hiding in the grass, unable to be seen. Able to look underground into the void and make it to a nearby bandit camp for a magic robe so I can enchant that later. I picked the Mage Stone for obvious reasons and waddled to Riverwood. In my recording it took a full hour to get into the town. In town I take a look at the giant chicken who could probably devour me and went to the trader and sold what I could. After that I tried to swim in the river. I am so small that the rapids take me with ease, and getting it downstream a bit. Plus my character was pretty down far into the water, so I'll make it into Septimus awkward later, but that won't be for a long while. Heading to the Whiterun stables, I tried my best to get into the carriage and looted a couple of vendor chests in Dawnstar and Solitude. Financial head start, and also I'm going to need much better equipment if I'm going to survive what is yet to come. Heading to the first chest, the guard looks at me in confusion. I get a good look at the chest under the ground, bought me a horse which helps out a ton, then head into Whiterun. Inside Whiterun, I immediately try to attack a guard to get to Dragon's Reach quickly, but my attacks start to clip into the ground. This is going to be a major problem, but more on that here in a little bit. I enchant what I could, then return to Riverwood to head to Bleak Falls Barrow. With my horse, it took what would normally be a 30-minute journey a couple of minutes. I had to skip the first tower and fought up the steps. It was a slow one, but eventually I make it in, and the arrows were constantly flying over my head, so that was a little interesting. How long could this dungeon possibly take? It took 1 f***ing hour. 1 f***ing miserable hour of pain and tedium. I about gave up on the run right then and there, but I kept on. It took 2 full minutes to get through the first entry room, and that is a sign of the pain this challenge brings on. I solved the first puzzle, then come across some skeevers. These are supposed to be easy fights, but my attacks kept clipping in through the ground. Over and over again. Eventually I fried some skeever, and that just made my day all the more enjoyable. Deeper inside I fought the wounded frostbite spider, more giant than usual. Sure, the door is normally a safe spot, but I move so slow, so it gets a lot of cheap shots at me as my attacks continue to warm the floor instead. Eventually goes down and Arvel is able to get away because of my not swift movement speed, but returns randomly to attack me, so I fry me up some Arvel. Further into the tomb, I encountered the Draugr, and boy, I was angry as hell during these encounters. Because of the terrain, my attacks would keep on clipping into the ground. I ended up going through a lot of supplies just because my attacks were not connecting. Plus, I don't like playing as a mage in Skyrim in general. And the pain would continue further in, attacks not hitting, and yeah, it was not a fun time. Another bullshit thing is that my killing blows would do nothing, and that's even more icing on this cake of hell. In the swinging sights room, I just damage boosted through. After more pain and torture, I finally made it to the boss room. And yeah, this fight also sucked. Once again, my attacks would keep clipping in the ground, and it took several attempts of no-cell attacks. The strategy that ended up working was going off the side of the platform, dealing burst fire damage, and with a well-timed level up. The terrain was nice enough to work with, and the boss went down. Finally! After 1 hour, suffice to say, this run was terrible. Back at Dragon's Reach, I do the story beats until the Jarl tells me to fight a dragon. While I was there, I decided to class change into a conjurer. If I can't hit things because of the terrain, I'll just let something else take care of it. After crawling through the fields, time came for the first dragon fight against Myrmilnir. Between the Whiterun guards, the Flame Atronach, and little old me blasting with small lightning bolts, the dragon goes down with little fuss. After the battle, I take time to refill my sanity meter, since I know a major roadblock is coming up very soon, so I take some time to do a little exploring. I thought it would be a good idea to get the Flame Cloak spell just so that way I can better hit stuff when the ground says no. Turns out you need a destruction skill of 40 to learn it, and since my skill is in the 20s, that will be a major no for the run. I went to the college, a couple of wizards before I looked it up. So yeah, that idea turns out to be a bust. Flame Atronach it is. The next idea that will be pointless more later will be getting another level of the Whirlwind Sprint Shout, since I will need some sprints for the speed gates coming up soon. I have two options, either I go through a long Draugr Crypt, or I go through a long Draugr Crypt with a Dragon Priest. I decided the latter because every overworld problem can be solved with horse. I make my way to the exterior of Volstagg, and instead of going through the dungeon, I just go over it. Between my size and the horse being horse, the game got very buggy where randomly would be sent flying, randomly, especially getting close to the wall. Eventually, I do get close enough to the wall, hop off, learn the shout, then run like hell on my steed away from the Dragon Priest, since I have more than enough hell coming up with one eventually. After getting away, I encountered an odd sight with a bard who soloed a couple of bandits. Sing on, my friend, sing on. After all that prep work was all done, I returned to Riverwood and begun climbing to the throat of the world via horse. I don't want to climb the mountain as an ant, plus if I didn't do the skip, I would just do it with a horse anyways. With that was done, I returned to Winterhold, going to the nearby dragon den to fight a dragon for a soul for sprint. A dragon actually rendezvoused with me right outside town. Took nearly all my healing supplies just because turns out high elves aren't the most offensive, hence why I prefer Bretons. My horse joins the fray and helps me finish the fight, a good horse indeed. Since we were in the neighborhood, I thought to pay Septimus a visit. I don't go to Aftan for a long time, but I do need a horse to get here anyways. After a swim, I thought I could do a little cheeky exploit and pickpocket the required items off of him. It would be funny, it took a lot of attempts because apparently it's easy to notice an insect climbing around in your clothes. Eventually I snagged both of them so I don't have to converse with Septimus, and it does lead to a fun outcome soon enough. Enough of the detours, time to get back on track and talk to the Greybeards. They seem very interested in teaching words of power to someone the size of their hand. After initiation, they lead me to the courtyard where the first major wall comes into play for the run. The Whirlwind Sprint Gate. I tried a couple times using the wait to pause time so I could queue up a second sprint, but no avail. And during the attempts, I was visited by some armed guards from Septimus Ignis. He is very much the type of guy who would send armed guards to the top of a mountain to kill an ant. With that little distraction out of the way, the result was still the same for the sprint, getting nowhere, and the next option would be getting the final word of sprint, so I departed to Dead Man's Respite. The dungeon thankfully isn't as long as Bleak Falls Barrow, but still lasts for a long while. I thought I would have held trying to get the claw off the table, but I could pick it up. The dungeon is pretty straightforward, I just have to use a lot of potions to get to the first few rooms, but the Atronach is pretty strong. The worst part of the dungeon was the lower levels because turns out being an ant means a puddle is an ocean. The area also has a slicing platform that gets me a couple times, but Whirlwind Sprint saves the day yet again. Took a while, but eventually I did get through. As for Olaf, I had help from the Helper Ghost, plus the Atronach, they put in almost all the work for the fight. Sure, the shout does quite a lot of damage, but he was more distracted by the ghost anyways. I grabbed the shout and turned in the college questline since that's basically the entire questline. After having the entire room stare at the Microman, I attended Burning Man but went AFK, away from the flames so I didn't watch it go up. Oh well. I need another dragon soul for the shout, so I started to ride from Whiterun to the mountains hoping for an encounter eventually, and I didn't even make it to the caves to find one. More potions depleted, the dragon goes down, and I get my final Whirlwind Sprint shout. I return to the Greybeards and hope it will be enough. Turns out, no it wasn't. I tried for a while, and I was about to give up, when I had the dumb idea to bring my horse in. I hop the keep and make my final attempt. By Azura, I make it through. Once again, Any overworld problem can be solved by horse. Next up is Sovngarde after restocking potions. I really wish you could bring horses into dungeons because there is one more gate to get through, which is pretty much where the run goes to die. I knew this part would kill the run, but I kept on going. After the welcoming party, I headed into the side room, trying to clip through the wall. Probably with the character size and object not interacting as it should for the Sovngarde skip, I tried buckets, plates, but no avail. I could not make it through the exit door. I eventually gave up and played the dungeon as normal, detouring for the ethereal shout for later, which is going to be almost essential. The reason the run went to die is because of the sprint gate late into the dungeon. I tried my best, summoning the data, maybe trick the gates, pause time, all that stuff, but no avail. I left the dungeon and tried to sequence break the game. Well, I had the game crash on me trying to get onto with a horse. Second try, I get into the embassy with the horse trick, grab the info, and when I went to talk to Delphine, she was downstairs, which is locked, and I thought the run would be impossible, but I forgot for speedruns you could go right to Esbern at this point instead of talking to Delphine. So technically you could beat the game as small as possible, but for the sake of this run, which is all story missions, you cannot beat the game as an ant. But since we're at least 7 hours through the run at this point, I returned to Sovngarde, and despite the game, I set my character to 2 times the normal size and sprint through the place. Not even needing to use Whirlwind Sprint on the gate. I finished the dungeon as an ant, and told to return to Riverwood End, go through the bookcase-shaped door, which is unlocked this time, then departed to Kynesgrove. Saloknir was certainly something. Sure, a lot of healing supplies were used in the fight, and sure, Delphine didn't help out much, either that or I'm fighting the Sharpie way more than usual. The flame spell do a number on me, and I'm always running out of magic quickly because I don't like playing as a mage, obviously. Eventually the dragon is slain, and Delphine is shocked that a little ant can bring down such a big creature. So she sends me to Thalmor Embassy. Instead of doing the smart thing of shopping for supplies, I dropped all my stuff off to Melbourne, then hop onto the right of the embassy. You are set to regular size after getting off the carriage, so you would have to do the embassy skip regardless to beat the run as an ant, so In the embassy, I give the guy his brandy, and even though I'm as slow as possible, I'm still able to slip out with ease. I grab my supplies and proceed to let hell break out. What is a mage's weakness besides basically anything? Shock damage! And guess I forgot to buy magica potions! I was able to get through the first room with the little issue, but the other rooms sucked. First go outside, the enemies kept getting the best of me, so second try I tried to fight some of the enemies, retreated inside to the keep, and let my flame atronach do the work. It worked out pretty well, all things considered. In the solar I tried the same thing, but the only thing that followed me outside was a storm atronach that managed to deplete most of my health. Back inside, it was a struggle with my magicka, but eventually I come out victorious in the mob room. Just took a couple of attempts. I rescued Melbourne, then escaped with my life. Not Melbourne, he tried to fight the frost troll. Didn't go well. At least I had the high ground, so my flame atronach was able to fry some troll, and then after all that was done, I departed to Riften. Inside of the Ratway, I tried to give a necromancy a go. It was a trade-off more or less. Fight one enemy, resurrect them, die to the next foe. After a while, I make it deeper into the dungeons and fight the Thalmor. Once again, I don't like playing as a mage. I had enough magicka to let the flames deal with the Thalmor as I played microtank. Eventually, I escaped Riften with Esbern, with little resistance besides the welcoming party. We reunited with Delphine, then left for Skyhaven Temple. Horse continues to carry me literally through the run. Not much really happened heading to Karspire. The dragon was distracted by non-ants, and my flame atronach took out whoever wanted a piece of me. Inside, Esbern and Delphine took out the Forestworn before I could get close enough. I solved the simple puzzles even an ant can solve, spilled not even a droplet worth of blood on the ground, and grabbed some blade armor for the next fights. I learned where to go next. Before heading to Aftan, I gathered more resources because the next part is going to suck. So who likes spending not 1 but 2 hours in a dungeon? That's Aftan for you. My flame atronach was starting to fall off in terms of effectiveness at this point, and the dwarven bots are pretty effective against my guy. After a while I got to the pistons part. Every other run these would be non-issue, but this isn't your standard run. I didn't want to get pushed off, so I sprinted past and let the atronach take care of the spiders. And I headed into the second act of Aftan. This is where the dungeon really began to suck. For some reason my atronach would just spawn who knows where, falling down didn't feel consistent thanks to small hitbox hitting everything. Eventually I found my way to the bottom and got cornered. The Falmer were pretty effective against my atronach, and only my hoarding saved the day. After a long grueling battle I was able to slip away into the third part. This part wasn't actually too bad for right now, not as many Falmer as usual. As for the Centurion, he could take out most of my health bar in one duo attack. The main thing that saved my ass for this part was the flame atronach that ran away long enough so I could slip on by to the door and open it. The atronach ran up to me on the second attempt, and by some divine miracle, Sulat decided to attack the Centurion and beat it. I barely make it out alive, and heading through Blackreach, it wasn't that bad if you know what you're doing, just the intro part is the worst. The Atronach was more than enough to distract them. I pushed buttons, struggled to grab the scroll, then I left. I was nearby a giant's camp, so I thought I could replicate Attack on Titan. Didn't go as planned, so I just bailed. I returned to High Hrothgar afterwards, AFK'd as they were yelling at a bug, and went to the top of the world to begin a terrible Alduin fight. Alduin really isn't as bad as you are able to duck away and weave and move out of the dangerous attacks. Guess who doesn't have that luxury? This fight just sucked. I have little DPS besides my conjuration, and fire is weak to ice so often it would die, plus Alduin resists fire anyways, so that is even more of a pain. My fireballs did decent damage, but I was always running out of magic. And throughout the fight, I was always running out of potions too and magicka. What didn't help was the meteors hitting me for a lot of damage and blinding me. What helped was hiding behind a rock and poking out when I needed to. I used every potion I had, no mana, no healing potions afterwards, and I was only barely able to come out on top after 13 grueling minutes. I know you're supposed to use robes for magic since they have a much greater mana regeneration, but I need a tank hit since I have no mobility, hence why me struggling with every single fight. With that all done and dusted, time for the Peace Council. All the major leaders were pretty confused as to why there was an ant-sized rep inviting them to a council. Then they were trying to recruit said ant-sized warrior to fight for their military. During this time I restocked on potions using every septum I had, then became very intimate with the chair. Since I became a chair, I decided to benefit the Ruby Throne the most. Also because the Stormcloaks really pissed me off this run because Wulfric decided to move away when inviting him, making me walk even further in my very slow pace. They were very pissed obviously and left, but at least I could capture a dragon. Some final prep work, I let Odovig try to snack on something the size of a tooth, let him go, then ride a Skuldafn. Fuck this place. It fucking sucked. The intro party at least were taken care of by the Flame Atronach. As for the dragons, my DPS was so low it was a slog, but I was able to sneak past since they were landing in pretty weird spots. Puzzles inside required more legwork than usual. Before the big boss at the end, I picked up Stormcall, which is all but essential for the last part. Outside, I am welcomed by the dragons who finally wanted a piece of me, and a lot of Draugr. To survive, I just hover around the exit, pop in to rethink and heal, headed out, do some damage, then repent and return, since they weren't really too concerned about coming in after me. After a while, I come out on top, but the bottom to the hardest part of the run, hands down. Nocturne sucked. Extremely. I always forget what each Dragon Priest does, and I normally just sprint past this guy anyways. Today I remember that Nocturnes can steal your Atronachs, and guess who is the genius that's been relying too much on Atronachs this entire run because every other aspect is heavily limited. I died a lot to this guy. Between his massive damage, draining my magicka because I don't like playing mages, and stealing my Atronachs, I died a lot. I tried standing my ground, fighting on the steps, and I was about to give up and play on very easy, until I remembered a little cheese strat that I employed a little bit for the first part, and decided to go full force with it. When I was initially clearing the outside area on the second floor, I was using Stormcall to open the fight, and when I engaged Nocturne, I noticed that half of his health was already drained, so that was my key to victory. Since I was engaged in the fight range when I last saved, my best bet was to get close enough to aggro, run away with Become Ethereal and use everything I can to tank the damage and get to the door. Just barely. Then I would wait 3 hours, exit, Stormcall, let him get zapped, then repeat. He would often hang out pretty close to the door, so I would have to make my outside trips very brief. His health never regenerated, so I could do this to get him caught. Eventually he gets caught up on some terrain, slips and falls down to the level below. So I just stood there until Thor struck him down for the last time. And since my looting included the key to his afterlife, I would have to go down there and fetch my items. I would have to fall, then redo the entire interior again. One last f*** you from the game. I returned the staff to the pedestal, then departed to the afterlife. Besides being probably the first ant in heaven, not really much happened in Sovngarde. It was foggy, third person helped out quite a bit. As for Soon, he was pretty easy compared to the Dragon Priest. Sure, he hits pretty hard, and what psychopath would use a giant axe to kill an ant? Well, after launching my blazing balls of fire at him with my Atronach, he let me go into the dining hall, and to a picnic, this would be absolute heaven. I talked to the heroes of old with a very confused Ysgrimmar watching, then head outside for Alduin 2. With all the bullshit I had to endure on this run, Alduin 2 was a victory lap. He hardly did anything to me. Between my backup, he never even bothered attacking me. Between superior firepower, hitting the shout first try, and just better strats and prep work, the fight went down without a hitch. Really, there is not much to go on for this final fight. In fact, it only took 90 seconds to take down compared to the previous 13 minutes. I used one last fireball and proved no, you cannot beat Skyrim as an ant, without major sequence breaks. Well, that was terrible. The run was super difficult because I had to face tank basically everything as a mage, which doesn't go hand in hand. Plus, I don't like playing as a mage to begin with in Skyrim. I prefer the stealth approach. The run is technically possible if you clip into the Thalmor Embassy and do things the speedrun way, but for all main quests, you cannot. You might be able to beat it as an ant if you're able to clip through Usengrav's exit, but you immediately fail upon starting the Thalmor Embassy, so you have to do the clip either way. As for Usengrav, you might be able to clip through the back door. I'm not really good at the clip to begin with, unless I want to do alternate dimension horse magic, which I'd normally ban from my runs. Between being super slow and a lot of attacks just clipping into the ground, I was not having any fun with this run. The only thing that saved the run was the Flame Atronach. This is one challenge I don't recommend anyone doing. Maybe as a baby, but not full-size minimum. At least I had some fun trying to think outside the box to get past some of the game's hurdles, but not actually executing them. And to wrap up the video, I do want to say thank you all so much for getting me up to the 500 subscriber milestone. Honestly, at the start of the year, I was highly doubting I could make it to 400, let alone 500, and the growth lately has been pretty crazy. Recording these Skyrim challenges have been a blast. Sure, I do feel a bit like an imposter recording the videos considering the number of other challenge runners there have been for Skyrim, but having done a few of these runs, I feel better about myself and more confident in recording these. And who knows, if the challenge hits 1,000 subscribers, I might see if you can beat Skyrim as a giant. Though there will probably be a break before I record the next challenge. Gotta relieve myself because this challenge was definitely a drain. So if you like this challenge, be sure to drop a like and be sure to also subscribe. Any other terrible ideas, leave them down below. And this has been Orpheolus, and I'll see you all in the next one.